This month marks the 40th anniversary of the Iranian Revolution, when Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile, toppling the Shah of Iran's regime and changing the government from a monarchy to an Islamic republic. The consequences of that event continue to reverberate in U.S. policy and regional and international politics today. Suzanne Maloney, Deputy Director of the Foreign Policy Program at the Brookings Institution, joins us now from Washington, D.C. One of the concerns that people have right now in modern-day relations between America and Iran, are we closer to war now than we have been with them in these 40 years?
I think we're in a more unpredictable period than we have been in many years. There has been an estrangement between Washington and Tehran since November of 1979, when Iranian students overtook the American embassy and created a crisis which resulted in a 444-day standoff when American diplomats were held hostage. That animosity has waxed and waned over the years. It appeared to be in a period of real transformation during the Obama administration, a sense that the nuclear negotiations and the agreement that was produced in 2015 might in fact lead to a new opening between the two countries. Instead, what we've seen is an increase in tensions as President Donald Trump has walked away from the nuclear deal. The American policy is really one of maximum pressure toward Tehran with no obvious endpoint, and the Iranians don't have a clear approach to managing that pressure.
You know, I'm looking at an op-ed that John Bolton wrote back in 2015 in the New York Times. To stop Iran's bomb, bomb Iran. How concerned should we be about the idea that the way to deal with Iran might be through force, because that's the advice the president gets?
Well, ironically, one of the more moderating influences within the current administration is the president himself, who seems deeply averse to any further American entanglements in military conflicts in the Middle East, to the point that he's actually moved to withdraw American forces from Syria, as well as most likely Afghanistan, two conflicts in which the Iranians are both deeply enmeshed. In that sense, I think it's highly unlikely the president himself would authorize a war with Iran. Unfortunately, though, one can't necessarily control the inadvertent consequences of the approach that he has endorsed of applying pressure to Iran. When the Iranians reach a breaking point, it's entirely possible that we will find ourselves pulled into a conflict that neither side, in fact, desired.
Has it been worth it to walk away from the deal? Is Iran close to a nuclear weapon now? Have we created a strong enough deterrent where we can walk away?
I think the decision to walk away from the deal by the Trump administration was a critical mistake. The president, by suggesting that he might in fact jettison the agreement, had an opportunity to apply some of that leverage to get some additional pressure on a range of other concerns about Iranian behavior across the region. Instead, he chose to walk away from the deal, and that has left us in a weaker position. It's created this opportunity, I think, for the Iranians to themselves have the upper hand. Really, what happens next is going to be decided by Tehran. In my view, the most likely outcome from an extended crisis with Iran is one in which they seek to disrupt oil exports or production coming from some of their neighbors around the region, because anything that drives up oil prices will help them in terms of their own bottom line at a time of severe economic sanctions, and it would hurt the president's political capital in terms of continuing to apply those sanctions.
Are the economic sanctions that we have put on them working? I mean, there are articles here about Iran facing the worst economic challenge in 40 years, according to the president of the country. The rial has devalued by 70%. Inflation there is up past 30%. Is it working? Is the pressure working?
The pressure is working if your metric is simply one of economic impact. The Iranians are really facing hard times at the moment, and it comes at a time of some political crisis for Tehran as the political establishment begins to look toward what comes next and perhaps who comes next in terms of succession for the supreme leader. The sanctions are not working in terms of actually creating any restraint on Iran's approach to the region. And I think this is where the Trump administration's policy has really fallen flat. There is no evidence, in fact, historically, that economic pressure causes Iran to retrench from its activities and destabilizing actions abroad. And in fact, many of its policies are fairly low cost and even to some extent low risk for the regime to continue to undertake. really what we have done is to remove some of our ability to influence Iran's decisions around the region and critically eliminate our capacity to engage diplomatically with the Iranians.
Suzanne Maloney of the Brookings Institute, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.